Today in this video, we're going to quickly dissect a streets route that I use in my pug runs for my weekly 10s, my 12s. You can use this route to also push. When you get into pushing, there are some things you will want to maybe try to do, like pulling trash onto boss, doing larger pulls, but for the most part, this is how I pull streets in a weekly run. We're very fortunate that streets is a very linear dungeon, and the timer has been significantly nerfed, as well as some of the trash mobs and bosses in here. So this is actually one of the easier dungeons, in my opinion, this season. Also one of my favorites, so little fun fact. Starting off the dungeon, we are going to, of course, start with the first pull. Now, there is a strategy that you can use to lust this pack. If you lust this pack, the reason you would lust it is to have lust up for the menagerie boss fight. Now, there's an option to just lust first boss, but chances are it might not be up for the menagerie, so it's really up to your own group's discretion. The first pull can be quite scary. This mini boss, Zomaz, does a proxy strike. This is a ability you're going to see kind of present throughout this first trash area. This is an arcane damage tank buster, so obviously if you're a tank, make sure you're paying attention. One other thing though is hard light batons from the security cause melee attacks to deal additional arcane damage as well. So these are actually some pretty scary tank mobs that you want to pay attention to. And while the custom security doesn't necessarily have a tank buster, their melee attacks are basically a tank buster. So when they do cast Hardlight Baton or have this active, make sure you're trying to dispel it, or purge it, I guess. Mages, shamans, hunters, and blood elves can use, like, obviously their abilities to remove said baton. This first pull is very heavy on the tank. Outside of that, the rest of the trash in this first area is going to be more on your group to figure out. The next thing that I like to do personally is I like to grab the patrol with this pack here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line of sight on this pillar right here. Like there's like this little like lipped pillar. If you stand behind, all the mobs will kind of funnel in. The only thing I will say is that when you are pulling this patrol, notice it's routing. If it's next to this pack, don't tag it, because it's going to then pull, and that can become very, very, very deadly. But this pack is not, or these two packs together aren't too scary. You have an Overseer, which is going to spawn the Beam Slicer, and then there's that proxy strike that we talked about earlier. The beam will randomly spawn on a random player. After a few seconds, it'll kind of grow, expand out, and then it'll start rotating. So as a tank, just move the mobs away. It's not too hard. Just look for where the beam is. Make sure there's enough room for people to keep hitting the mobs and be away from the beam. You also have these officers here who start with this thing called a refraction shield on them. The refraction shield causes any abilities that hit them to reflect and deal arcane damage to the attacker. If you have a purge in your group, I recommend trying to purge. If you ever notice that you're taking a lot of damage, it's probably because of these refraction shields. The only thing you want to do then is just make sure you're kicking their abilities. Hard Light Barrier gives them a pretty big absorb. If it goes off, not the end of the world. The Hyperlight Bolt will definitely wombo people if they are also hitting into the refraction shield. So purges are great. Make sure you're kicking. The rest of the mobs in this entire area are exactly the same. So what I like to do then next is I grab this pack into this pack. And then generally, I'll also grab the mini boss. The mini boss does a couple of different things. First, he'll do a Radiant Pulse, which does group-wide damage. This can be LOS'd, so ranged people, as long as you know that the tank is pulling this mob, you can stand behind a pillar, generally like where this X is, to line of sight that to basically not take damage. Someone is also going to want to watch this kick, Empowered Glyph of Restraint. This applies a pretty nasty damage over time effect and a slow. Now, fun fact, because it is a slow and the damage being dealt is tied to said slow, if you have a way to remove snares, you'll actually be able to dispel this without having a dispel in your kit. So healers should aim to dispel, but things like Freedom, Tiger's Lust, Post Haste, I think Warlock, like Portal, things like Bladestorm, like basically a lot of characters have ways to remove snares from themselves. And if you can do that, you can definitely remove this, though you don't necessarily want this to go off. If you can kick it, kick it. The last thing, obviously, are the Rift Blasts. Just make sure you're avoiding those. Generally, what's going to happen because of the size of Zohan's health pool, who's the mini boss, he'll probably still be pretty healthy by the time all of these other trash mobs die. So then what you'll do is you'll chain the mini boss onto these last couple of mobs in this area. So it'll end up looking more so like this, except you get him in here a little bit earlier. Once Zohan dies, there will be a slight amount of RP for Zofex to spawn. Now, personally, once you get him into pull 4, the mini boss, he should die pretty quickly, and then you'll be handling these last 4 mobs, and then that'll give you time for Zofex to spawn. And that's pretty much how you handle the first area. Moving out of here, I like to go to the left or the south end towards the menagerie next. I think the pathing through here is much better. The mobs are extremely static. They have way less abilities, and they're way less lethal than going to the north side, which has all of these like wise guys and smugglers and stuff. I don't really ever recommend going up here. There are players who do. There are some high key push groups that do, but it's extremely volatile and requires a lot of coordination. For your weekly keys or to get used to this dungeon, I recommend going to the south. First thing you're going to do is you're going to pull his tracker Zocross. This guy has a few interesting things going on, right? He spawns the lockdown ability, which essentially forces players, sorry, not lockdown, it's chains of custody. Essentially, it forces everyone to play within 10 yards of this mob. I think this is a really cool mechanic. I like this a lot. He'll spawn a beam splicer, which you need to move away from, and then he'll cast lockdown on the tank, dispel, or use a way to like remove roots. So Tiger's Lost Freedom, etc. is really good for this guy. Once this guy goes down, you're going to have the 2 Ancient Core Hounds. These mobs have to be killed evenly or they will full heal, which can be obviously problematic. So make sure you're killing them evenly, not too difficult. They have a frontal to dodge that will pretty much one-shot you if you get hit in a higher key, and then Ancient Dread is a cast that just needs to be kicked. It's a 4-second cast, tons of time to react to it. You just need 1 kick pretty much for each mob. Next, we're going to get the Dire Horn down into the Night Claws. The Night Claws will just apply a bleed to players by using their Frantic Rip, and the Dire Horn does some AoE damage and charges a random player, stunning them. Not a very difficult pull, a little bit more on the healer, but if you get a bleed on you, use a defensive. So the next thing that I like to do, and this is totally contingent on your lust and when you prefer using it, you can go to Menagerie first, or you can clear some trash. So it's really up to you. Let's just say we're going to go to the Menagerie next, so you'll handle that boss fight and you'll be fine. The next thing after Menagerie that I like to do in my runs is I'm going to grab these 2 Peacekeepers and I'm going to drag them up to this mini boss. And then I'm going to drag this mini boss and those 2 Peacekeepers down to this Peacekeeper way down here. A couple of things this does, it gives you a ton of room to work with. When you get down to this side, all of this is like open space down here. And so you have a lot of room to handle Zofar. Big thing here is tank, watch out for the power kick. It's a pretty nasty knockback. Lethal Force will connect 2 players together. For some reason, we believe that this isn't necessarily scaling with key level. So if you do end up touching each other, it's actually not that bad. And then you obviously want to avoid the shock mines. The Peacekeepers, on the other hand, they do this thing called Quelling Strike, which is a burst of physical damage. When you're playing with a lot of casters, these mobs can be really, really dangerous. But if you're playing with like a very tanky composition, it's actually kind of free. And last thing they do is they do this Phalanx Field. This is a 75% damage reduction against magic damage. So when you're playing with like a full Fizz comp, this doesn't do a lot. If you're playing with a couple of casters, either pull the mobs out of the Phalanx Field or CC them. Use a stun, use a knock, displacement, whatever it might be, and you'll be good. The next thing that I like to do at this point is while this is all happening, I like to start RP. So the way you start RP is you need to walk up to this door. This will open the mailroom, and you need to walk right here. This will start the RP for the Oasis event. Now, you don't necessarily have to do either of those events right away. You can just basically keep pulling trash, but getting it started early is really, really important. So the next thing that I like to do, let's say you lusted on Menagerie. I'm going to then do the Oasis because we want lust to be back up for the Postmaster, for example. So we're then going to pull the Bazaar Overseer with the first set of lackeys when you start the minigame. Now, there is a chance that this Overseer is really far. He could be all the way down here. If that's the case, it's not a big deal. You'll do this pack by itself, and then you'll try to grab the second one with the Overseer. The thing you really want to avoid, though, is you don't want the Overseer with the final pack. You never want this to be the case, because double Overseer is going to be really, really, really deadly. So try to get this guy in nice and early, and then you'll end up chaining it into the second pack, and then the last pack you'll do by itself. At this point, you'll just go and you'll do Zogron, and it's all good. The Oasis, I should say. And then at this point, you're ready for the mailroom. Now, I like to do the mailroom in one big pull. The way you can do that as a monk specifically is you can set up a Transcendence right here. You'll pull this pack first, this pack second, this pack third. You'll roll back out, and then you'll transcend to your marker. This full room is really easy to handle. There's a couple of things you're going to look out for. Tanks, these post workers apply a bleed through letter opener. It can be dodged, but if it happens to hit you and connect, it leaves a pretty nasty bleed, like damage over time effect. Most tanks are fine with this effect, so it's not a big deal. You can always dwarf it off. The only other thing you really want to look out for are these male elementals. They do this thing called spam filter, which causes their allies to take reduced damage. And then they also will just do physical damage to a random player. Now, this can't be kicked or anything like that, but you want to like make sure you're like stunning them, knocking them, whatever you need to do. Next, we're going to pull the postmaster, do that boss. And then finally, this is kind of like the interesting part. If you're a little bit coordinated, you can tell someone to go do it. Generally, it's good to have your healer go and do it. You can also have like a very mobile DPS. But once you finish up the mailroom, you want someone to go up and start Soasmi's RP. It's like 30 seconds of RP. It's a big waste of time. So if you have someone run up and start RP, they can then jump back down here and then come back to meet you guys right here. While that's happening, you're going to have this pack and this pack being pulled together, putting you just over 100% counts. It's going to be 4 Peacekeepers and 1 Sparkcaster. Sparkcasters do a couple of casts. They do Scintillate, which just does... it makes people take more arcane damage and does a little bit of damage. And then you have Hyperlight Salvo, which is channeled, which you definitely want to interrupt this, especially if it's on someone who was hit by Scintillate. And then obviously, last but not least, because the RP was started, you can head right up and just jump right into Soasmi, finishing up the dungeon nice and quickly. So that is essentially how I run Streets. I think it's fairly linear. None of the packs are super dangerous. You're going to have some big pulls, some small pulls. You're going to try to get many lusts on bosses. The one thing I'll say is you can mix it up a little bit in terms of where you lust at. Let's say you lust Zofex. It might not be up for Menagerie, so maybe you want to do the mailroom boss first, so you could do it in any order. It doesn't really matter, just this is the routing that I would say makes the most sense, at least for pugs. So let me know if you have any questions down below. I still have Dawnbreaker and Priory left, I believe, to talk about, so I will be doing those videos here in the next couple days, so keep an eye out for those. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.